Fear and Hunger 2 is the new game that I've been playing on Steam, and I've been totally invested and committed to beating it. Being my first turn-based JRPG, I walked into the game completely blind, having no idea what was going on. I didn't play the first game and was just thrown into the mix of things. This seems to be a common trend for me, but fortunately for you, the viewer, I can provide you with the basic guide to help you start on the right track, so you won't want to smash your computer after 16 hours of gameplay like I did. This guide will contain very minor spoilers. I will mainly focus on gameplay elements and tips to set yourself up for success. So, let's get started. If you haven't played Fear and Hunger before, you're really in for a treat. The first thing we need to get out of the way is that you only have 8 saves, and you can only sleep in beds or in the train. Use them wisely. There are 2 alternate ways of saving using the Book of Enlightenment and the Perfection Circle, but consider those out in the early game. Something else to keep in mind is that saves are also a double-edged sword. Once you progress the time in the game, you actually make the game harder for yourself. Certain enemies will spawn on the later days, and you'll miss side quests. And you'll probably die more often at night than in the morning anyway. Don't save unless it's absolutely necessary, at least in the early game. I would say your first save should be within 30 minutes to an hour of game time. Sleeping is also the only way to choose new perks as well, but we'll get into that later in the video. Fear and Hunger is very deliberate. This game requires you to pay attention to every detail and every dialogue choice. This is the first big tip I can provide. Read the character history and play through the tutorial to learn the combat. There is also a combat manual that you can pick up along with the town map at the front of the train after the workshop, which teaches the mechanics as well. But basically, loot everything you can as you're going to need to stock up on supplies such as cloth, herbs, and food. If you're lucky, you might even find some key books. Some books early on can be very helpful, such as Alchemy Volume 1 and the Skin Bible books. Just keep in mind, you're going to die a lot within the first hour or so of game time, which is perfectly normal and fine. If you need to restart, that's totally okay. If you think you need to pick a new character as well, that's fine too. This game is a lot of trial and error, so don't be afraid to try new things to see what works and what doesn't work. Speaking of combat, understanding the combat system is important to your success, so here's a quick synopsis of combat in Fear and Hunger. You can attack an enemy limb, which will cut it off with enough damage. While you might be tempted to attack the head, the chances of landing the attack is fairly slim, and it'll be safer attacking limbs that hold weapons. For instance, if an enemy is holding an axe in their right arm, you might want to target the right arm and cut it off, hindering their axe attack ineffective. You can also cut off and wound enemy legs, which will make it easier to run away from them, as well as throw them off balance. Once the enemy is off balance, you'll be able to strike its head effectively and kill it. There are other ways to do damage, of course, like poisons and fire and glass and spells and stuff. Glass blinds the enemy, which will make it easier for the player to evade attacks, so it could be useful to use it turn 1. Guns can also be used, but ammo is hard to find. Guns are unique in the sense that you can shoot enemies before you initiate battle, and you're able to potentially shoot off arms. So it might be a good idea to shoot at stronger enemies before you start battle, putting yourself at an advantage early. Just know that pistols are good early on, but fall off in the later game. So pick and choose your fights carefully, as some enemies are much weaker than they seem. One thing to note though, and this is very important, everything regarding limbs also applies to you. This means that if you get your arm cut off, say bye-bye to two-handed weapons and guns. If you get both arms cut off, you're basically ineffective at dealing damage. If you get one leg cut off, you can't sprint, and if you get both cut off, you're crawling on the ground for the entire game. This is what makes the game brutal and every fight with an enemy dangerous. While there are specific ways to get your limbs back later in the game, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage early if you lose one. So try your hardest to think through every decision, and don't feel the need to fight every enemy you see. Medical supplies are rare and random, so use them cautiously as they are limited in the overworld. The last important tip is learning the ritual circles and how they can help you. There are 3 circles: the asymmetrical circle, the imperfect circle, and the perfect circle. Finding Skin Bible books allows the player to draw a specific god sign on a circle, and each god has their own preferred circle. For instance, drawing one god sign on an asymmetrical circle allows you to restore limbs. Another in the perfect circle will allow you to save. Drawing the right god sign in their respective circles also gains affinity with the god, which allows you to choose perks from that god's perk tree for the next time you sleep. The currency used to gain perks can also be acquired by chopping off heads of defeated enemies and sacrificing them in the imperfect circle. You can then craft the shards you receive into soul stones. One final thing to note is that killing NPCs will allow you to learn their skill tree. So do with this information whatever you please. In essence, loot everything you can, pick and choose your fights carefully, pay attention, and save when you feel it's best to do so. Hopefully this covers most questions for beginner players. Just know that you're going to die a lot, and hopefully you learn from your mistakes. This game is a true endurance test, but I believe in you. In the future, I want to make lore videos, so please don't forget to like and subscribe, especially if this is the content that you're looking to see. Again, I'm heavily invested in beating this game, so hopefully I did a good job of setting you up for success. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the comments and I could try to answer them. That's all I have, so goodbye.